Hello and welcome back to NATChat. I'm Mirella Rich. If you've just joined us, we're here with Paul Collins, who is a children's author and publisher and has also won various awards. Welcome back to the program.
Great, thanks.
Can you tell us some of the awards that you've won?
I haven't won too many, I must say. I've been shortlisted and I've had notable books, honourable mention books and second and thirds and every sort of thing that you can think of, every title except for those wins. I've had a few wins. Most proud of the inaugural Peter McNamara Award, which is a crystal ball, sort of Arthurian crystal ball, which came with a cheque, I might point out, which was fantastic. When I had bookshops, I actually sold crystal balls. And I remember one time a customer came in and was looking at it, and she said to me, "Oh, do they work?" I forget how I answered now, but yeah, it was quite a strange question to have asked of you. And I should have said something like, "Oh, I predicted you were going to ask that question."
She might have got that from the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, might have done. Do they work? So yeah, so that's got a pride of place. I also was awarded the William Atheling Award for work on the MEP Encyclopedia of Australian Science Fiction and Fantasy, and the Aurealis Award for doing some. I had a co-editor with that one, Meredith Costain, and we did a series called Spin-Outs for educational publisher Pearson. And they were basically science fiction, fantasy, ghost, supernatural stories.
Yeah.
And the guy who did the covers for them, I think that award was for the whole package. The guy was Mark McBride, who does the Del Toro Quest covers, who's become quite famous. Back in those days, he did about 45 covers for us.
Oh,
these
wow.
fantastic airbrushed dragons and what have you, all these covers. So. Yeah, that was the other one.
And you're also well known for the Quentaris Chronicles and the Jelindel Chronicles. Can you tell us how they came about?
Quentaris Chronicles came about when Michael Pryor, who also writes for younger readers, phoned me one day and asked me if I wanted to work on a shared world with him. Now, shared worlds are basically two authors or editors get together and they create the world. In this case, it's Quentaris, based on history, actually, Renaissance Florence in about the 1300s. So we've got the political system. Our two major parties are called the Guelphs and the Nibelines. And in those days they were the Guelphs and Ghibellines. So we've sort of had a play with names there. We've got about roughly the same population of 100,000 and what have you. And what makes Quentaris a magical world is that in the background is this mountain range. And in the mountain range are about 1,000 caves, and they're rift caves. So adventurers from around the planet of Amlis come to Quentaris and have to pay a toll to go through the gates, and they venture into any one of these 1,000 worlds. So all sorts of adventures can happen. So even if someone, say, doesn't want to set their story in Quentaris, and using our characters, we encourage people to use our characters, of course, because it is a series. And we have set up all the major characters that they could possibly want. But if they want to set their story in another world, they just come through Quentaris, they go into their world, they have their adventure there, and the rift caves are very unstable, and they can close at any time. So a lot of people get trapped there. They can age in other worlds because they're not all like Amlis, of course. They're just completely different worlds. So the only thing that we insist on is that the template doesn't change, because you can't have a building knocked down in a shared world, because in the next book comes along, the building's up. The readers will say, as I mentioned before about Tatiana, you've got people who know this world quite well. They'll say, "Oh, hang on, how come in that book this happened and in that book that's happened?" So at the end of each book, they're all standalone books. They're not sequential like Del Toro Quest. So you can read them all out of order. You could read book 26. We've got 2 books coming out next month. They're all standalone, and the template is that at the end of the book, it's got to be the same Quentaris as at the beginning of the book. So, you know, I get kids, when I go in and give workshops or talks to kids in schools, I've had kids say to me, "Oh, can you kill any of the heroes? Can you kill any of the people?" I say, "No, you can't kill. You can't bump off the characters." But none of our authors can change the characters or the scenario. The scenario's always got to stay the same. The status quo's got to be there. So it's quite an interesting series to have worked on. They've been going since 2002. As I said, there are 26 titles now, and there's going to be a new series, a series 2, coming out, where the next one will be The Quest of the Lost City, where a saboteur from one of the other states, Torosh, comes in and sets this spell of undoing, and the whole city gets lifted, bedrock and all, in the river, thrown through a vortex and thrown into one of the rift caves, and for the rest of that series, and I don't know how many there will be of that, Quentaris is going to be drifting from world to world, trying to find their way back through one of the rift caves, through the vortex, back to Amlis, where they originally came from. And as it turns out, Tolrush has also been lifted up in the same spell, because the spell's gone wrong. It was really to undo all the good things, all the wealth that Quentaris has, but it's actually undone the whole magic binding of the city, but it's lifted Tolrush at the same time. So you've got these ships, they're like huge galleons now, and of course Tolrush being the bad guys, they're like a pirate ship with all the tattered sails and what have you, and they've got pincers at the front, for ramming and stuff. So yeah, that's a fun series. Jelindel Chronicles, they came about from a short story called The Weakest Link that I published in an anthology I did for Penguin called Dreamweavers. And back in those days, we're going back to the 90s, the mid-90s, all the authors that you know so well today, like Sarah Douglas, Garth Nix, Kate Forsyth, all the well-known Australian fantasy writers weren't actually around. I mean, they were around, but they weren't publishing fantasy novels back in those days. So it was hard getting a lot of people writing for, it was Australia's first fantasy collection. So I had to sort of double up a couple of times with getting authors I knew, like Keith Taylor, to write under pseudonyms. And one of the stories was a pseudonym that I actually wrote with a guy called Sean McMillan. The story, Weakest Link, had so many ideas that actually it's developed into Dragonlinks, which is 100,000 words. And of course that's gone on to Dragonfang, Dragonsight, and now War Dragon X. There's 400,000 words there now. So funny thing, we're talking about fans and kids writing in, getting into your world. Penguin forwarded an email to me a couple of years ago. Apparently some kid had read The Weakest Link, and it was under a pseudonym, Roger Wilcox. And this kid seemed to think that I'd stolen the ideas of the Roger Wilcox story in The Weakest Link and written it as a chapter. Obviously it changed a bit, but as a chapter in Dragonlinks. And his teacher wrote off to Penguin and said, "Oh, one of your authors has done this, that, and they forwarded me the thing." I said, "Actually, I'm part of Roger Wilcox. It's my story." But I thought to myself, "Yeah, see, you can't cheat. Imagine if I had, I would have been sprung." That's what happens when you're writing for kids.
Beautiful.
So,
we're about to go to a break now. You're watching NATChat. Stay with us. We'll be back with more very shortly.